So today's episode of The Walking Dead Daryl Dixon Season 2 is a pivotal one, and we end on a big cliffhanger where everything's converging at the nest and there is a big attack coming, and we found out Madame Janae's plan to bring the fast zombies as a weapon in order to take out the rebellion, the union, they're so called. So we got two parts of this episode, just like the whole season so far. We got Carol's part and we got Daryl's part. And continuing the trend of previous episodes, the Daryl parts of the episode have been pretty solid overall. And Carol's part of the episodes have been kind of like rushed and a lot of contrivances. So we continue that in this episode, but this episode has a lot more things happening. So it feels definitely more entertaining to watch when we have big scenes, big action scenes and stuff like that. So overall, I would say this episode is stronger in one sense, but in another sense, we kind of have a lot of stuff that we have lore stuff about these fast zombies and just some things that just don't work for me. It's just gnawing at the back of my head with this planned attack and the issues with that. So we'll break into that as we go. But overall, I'm just kind of a little bit mixed on this season so far. But this episode might be the best one. So let me know what you guys think. But we start off with a Madame Janae flashback, and we're getting contrast in the same way we had Isabel flashbacks to the outbreak last season, where before the outbreak she was in the nightclubs, she was pickpocketing people. We're getting that contrast of not somebody you would expect would become a nun, right? Here we have something similar where Madame Janae is this military leader in the current day, but in the flashback, she's just a lowly janitor getting abused by her boss, and they're talking about going on strike for better health care coverage and stuff like that. So this is just the contrast, and even her number 2 is in this flashback. She was also a janitor at the Louvre. So I like the before and after thing. I like using the location of the Louvre. I do wish we got a little bit more out of this scene when the outbreak comes, but the main thing there is that her husband gets eaten by the zombies and she can't do anything about it. So she is definitely motivated by that in large part. And we have that kind of contrasted with an earlier scene where her boss is being nasty to her. And then she says, well, her husband just got diagnosed with cancer. So just trying to explain things from her perspective. And it's in the same way, like her husband's death kind of leads to where she is in the current day. So I like this flashback ultimately. A couple nitpicks, because it's your boy. That's what we do here. So I have to nitpick the museum rules for the Louvre. And this guy that she's cleaning up, a guy drops a drink, a soft drink, and then she's sweeping it up. And you're not allowed to drink drinks at the Louvre. Now, of course, people break rules all the time. But you'd think that scene would play out a little differently if they aren't allowed to have drinks in the first place. So that's just something I thought was funny. And another thing I thought was funny was this scene out here where they're talking about walking out, and Janae doesn't even believe in having this protest at all. She's not really on board with it because there's no point to it, and the tourists who go to the Louvre aren't going to care. It's again just another contrast where before she didn't believe in fighting for anything, and now she has a cause in the current day. But again, in this scene, they use the phrase selfie. And remember, the outbreak happened in 2010. So one thing that's kind of funny is it actually turns out it's out of place. So I looked up on Google Trends the term selfie. So nobody's really searching for it. Nobody's searching for it. And then 2013 comes around and people start searching for it. And it's most common in 2014. In 2010, nobody was really using the term selfie, so it's a bit out of place, but it stood out to me because I was like, I remember 2010, I don't think people were talking about selfies back then, so I had to look it up. But yeah, overall, this scene, it's interesting. We get a little before and after with Janae, we get into her psychology, and we've had this theme of art throughout the first season where, the bar had works of art there. And there was also like the zombie symphony, this guy trying to keep the human soul alive with the zombie music. And we're having something similar here, except, she has a very different view on art that we get to later in the episode. But it's very convenient. It's our first convenience with the Carol part, and there are a lot of them, where just one day into being in France, she immediately is talking to the most important person in the area. So it just feels very rushed and convenient. You know, it's almost like Carol should have had to work her way up to this, or she should have had to hear about Janae in the background and learned about her and then tried to infiltrate that way, get through to her, you know, have some sort of plan. But it's just as soon as she shows up, she's getting a meal and she's talking to Janae very conveniently. But here we get, you know, a soldier of hers who throws food on the ground because he's not happy with it. And then, you know, she chastises him. So we get this idea that she is trying to fight back against the bullies, you know, that started with the pre-apocalypse flashback. So it's just a before and after. And I did like that scene. I feel like a lot of waiters in the real world want to treat customers that way sometimes when they do ridiculous stuff like that. But we have Janae just playing the role of the military leader. You know, that definitely feels true to what she would have to do in that situation. So here we have Carol getting her job assignment, and then they split up. She has her friend that was with her in the van, and he's got a friend he wants to find. And they have these zombie experiments, and we're now seeing through Carol's eyes the fast zombies that we saw last season. And now here we get kind of a revelation lore dump about the burner zombies, where the burner zombies were supposedly an accident, a mistake as a result of these experiments. That doesn't necessarily work for me, though, because these experiments that are shown always have people who are armed in case the zombies get out of hand, and they immediately put them down. So we have this idea that burner zombies were created and they were able to escape, even though they have prisoners who are shackled, and we have all these guns aimed at them nearby. So I don't know that that's a credible explanation for the burners, but I guess that's what we're going with. And we're going back on the whole, like, the zombie virus is evolving thing that happened over in America in the final season of the original show. So I don't know why they kind of got cold feet with that idea, because we've already done it. Now we got Sylvie in her final episode here, and she's praying for the protection of Laurent, and she is praying to have the strength and courage to do what she needs to do to protect him. And even though later in the episode Losang says she didn't have faith, it's obvious that she does, and her faith was very strong in that Laurent was protected, and she did try to get the word out best she could about what they were going to do to Laurent, that it wasn't going to work out. So she's trying to spread the word, yell to everybody, even though she's being kept prisoner, she's trying to get the word out, and then she ends up going over the balcony and dying. Sylvie's death does come off a little bit as random. You know, I don't think it's going to be satisfying for a lot of people, even though she is trying to do the right thing and save Laurent and stuff, and I like her as a character, but she just kind of trips over the edge, and it's like over waist high, so it doesn't seem all that likely to happen. So I don't know, it does feel a little random. And then they don't really do anything with it. Like, she falls over, Losang's upset about it, but what she was trying to get through to people has no effect. You know, they just continue on with their day and they don't really address it, other than Sylvie showing up in the next scene as the zombie that's going to bite Laurent. So I don't really know what the purpose of this is, other than like just shock value. So I like the scene in some ways, but in other ways it just doesn't really land. So the execution could have been better. Now we're with Fallow, Daryl, and Isabel, and they're able to break into the facility by climbing the walls, seemingly climbing up some rocks. And Laurent's getting ready for the ceremony, and Losang dopes him up because obviously he would be scared in the face of a zombie coming to bite him, and he probably wouldn't let it happen. He would struggle, and that's not the image they want. So they drug him up for the ceremony. So now we have this ceremony scene. Everybody's here, and it's going to turn into a disaster if it's allowed to happen. But thankfully, of course, Daryl gets there in time, and then all chaos breaks loose. We have Daryl saying, "Show's over, mother effer," and I love that. I love that we can have Daryl swearing in this show now, because it feels so right with his character. So now we have Daryl shooting a bow at Sylvie here, And I will just say that she looks a little bit too turned to me, in that it just happened. You know, she just turned, I guess, the previous day. So it does feel like she's a little bit too aged. You know, whereas like in Fear the Walking Dead, we had fresh looking zombies. I think that would have been a little better. But it's an epic scene because we got a very chaotic thing happening, and we have all of these guys coming after them. They manage to sneak away, they hide, and then Daryl has an epic fight scene after they separate. He tells Laurent, you got to go to our special training place. And then they sneak out, and Daryl stays back and fights. And Daryl's just absolutely brutal in this scene, and he takes out like 10 guys. It's a well-staged fight scene, and it's definitely exciting to watch. The only thing at the back of my mind is just the plot armor that Daryl has, where there's never a point where I think he might die, right? Because we know it's his name on the show. So he's never dying until at least the last episode of this show, but I don't even see that happening. Now, one thing with this scene is it does come off a little bit like a video game. You know, it does feel like Daryl shouldn't be able to do what he does, even though we know he's a great fighter. But, you know, the staging of the scene, I think, does a decent job, but it does feel like he should be overwhelmed a little bit quicker than he is in this scene. So we have Carol here infiltrating, and she's passing out food and asking about Daryl, and she just so happens to run into Cordon, who is a prisoner and probably shouldn't be in with the general population, right? So it does seem very convenient again. So we got another thing where, you know, she just immediately finds the person who knows what she needs to know. But she lies to him as well, which I like that she's been lying all season. It's just kind of like how Carol operates. And she says, Daryl is my brother, which in a way is kind of true. You know, in a spiritual sense, that they have this like sibling-like relationship, even though they are not technically related. So it's a lie in one sense, but it's not necessarily fully untrue, right? But here we have Cordon just revealing the information, which ends up in the wrong hands because Carol immediately tells this guy, who of course is going to use that as leverage to get what he wants. So Carol tries to get him to go with her to the nest, but Carol needs to tell somebody because she doesn't know France well enough to know, based on what Cordon said, where Daryl actually is. So now she does know, even though, you know, the guy's just like, it's half a day's ride this way. It would still be pretty hard to actually find it, but, you know, it's just one of those things where the world feels smaller than it really is in Walking Dead nowadays, just because they can just go to France and immediately in one day talk to the most important person in the area. So I don't know. It's just a nitpick I have to live with, I guess. So here we have Daryl. He got kidnapped after all that. So here we have the conversation about the themes of the episode, and the big theme of this episode is faith, much like the rest of the season up to this point. So here we have the two visions of the world colliding. We have Daryl, who's very practical and realistic, and he doesn't necessarily have principles other than protecting the ones he cares about. And we have Lo Sang on the other side, who is trying to create this community that has this faith, this narrative off in the distance. And Daryl's a very realistic, practical type of guy, so he doesn't go for these type of things, whereas Lo Sang is trying to create that. And we just have these clashing visions. So I like this scene overall. It's pretty good. We got some good performances, and we got Daryl just saying nothing really except for, what if you're wrong? You know, talking about the Laurent thing, because obviously he's not really thinking through, because yes, you can have faith, but once the real world collides with that, if it's not compatible, like if Laurent turns as a zombie, your entire narrative is going to collapse anyway. So in a way, Daryl almost saved his group's faith as a result of his decisions, because it would have come collapsing down after that ceremony, surely. So it's again, maybe it'll turn out that he's immune, Laurent that is, but I sincerely doubt it. And even if you can't just go into that with the assumption that it's going to happen. So, and here we have a scene with Carol where she's trying to escape, but it's just kind of dumb on Carol's part, because she should know that there are gates and there are walls, and that she can't just ride out without being spotted. And that's exactly what happens, which I'm glad that at least she doesn't just ride off into the sunset, because that would feel definitely unrealistic. But here, Carol should know that because, one, they're being kept prisoner here. They're not allowed to go where they're not told to go. And also, even if they weren't doing that, zombies could get in at any time. Of course, if you're out in the open in the night air and there aren't gates there could be zombies infiltrating. So, of course, they're going to have walls and gates, and it just feels kind of dumb that Carol just rides into that trap and doesn't try to climb a wall. Again, it's a nitpick, but you add all these things up, and it's just a very convenient, contrived kind of plot device. So I can't overlook it completely. But here we have a scene where, you know, her buddy in the truck sells her out and the information that she gave him to save his friend, Julian, over here. So that ultimately rings true to me. That makes sense. And here we have a scene with Janae and Carol where Carol almost seems to tell the truth. She talks about how she manipulated somebody into flying her over here, and then she cooks up a new lie to Madame Janae. And Madame Janae doesn't even really buy it by the end because she says to Carol, "Oh, you're going to kill your friend now." So she doesn't buy it either. She knows that Daryl is something more than what she says, which is that she wants to kill Daryl, and that's why she's here. So I love that Carol's just trying to manipulate her way to get what she wants. She's backed against a corner at this point, and that's all that she has left is that play. So Daryl's kidnapped now, and we have a backstory here with the Louvre, where Madame Janae and them are their convoys riding past the Louvre, which feels a little convenient. And here Madame Janae is talking about how after the apocalypse, she started looking at the paintings in the Louvre in a new light, because a lot of them are of a religious nature, and she's starting to view them as sort of prophetic in a way, where it's just an apocalyptic vision of the world, and she's starting to think of it as just humankind dealing with their own violence against themselves. So that's how she views the religious iconography in the Louvre, and she's talking about how the Union on the other side, they're using these fables, she calls them fairy tales, as a means of control. And in a sense, that is kind of what Lo Sang and them are doing, although they do actually believe in it, or else they would do like what I said last week, where they would try to fake the ceremony instead of actually biting Laurent. They would have a person dressed up as a zombie or something like that. So in one sense, she is kind of projecting, because as we'll see later in the episode, she kind of has a faith-based narrative of her own, where instead of using the religious iconography, she's talking about how people need to sacrifice themselves for the greater good, and they'll live on for eternity through their sacrifice. So she's doing the exact same thing that she's criticizing the Union for. So I think that that's pretty interesting. We have two sides on opposite sides of the spectrum, and they actually have a lot of similarities. Now, I personally would prefer to deal with Lo Sang than Janae, because Janae doesn't seem to have guiding moral principles at all, and Lo Sang at least does, even though he's misguided and a little bit too into his stories that he's telling. You know, and here we have Janae, who just doesn't have any qualms about just massacring people for this cause, and she just has a vision of the world that once she destroys her enemies, things will get better. That's another faith-based thing. So it's almost like she's motivated by revenge, you know, trying to go against the bullies, like she's kind of talking about earlier in the episode. So it's interesting to kind of get into the psychology of the two sides, but I would definitely pick the Lo Sang side at the end of the day. But here we have Laurent and Fallow in the cave, and they have to go because it looks like Isabel and Daryl aren't coming. And as a matter of fact, that's how it goes. So this scene right here is really quite lovely, actually. I really like this scene. It's the best scene in the episode, and it's just the two of them talking. So we get to really feel their connection, and we get to hear Daryl telling his story about how he went out searching for Rick, but really he was looking for something deeper. And he's always been searching for meaning and purpose. He didn't say that explicitly, but that's kind of the implication. So he's always looking for something, and he found it after all. He found Isabel, and he found Laurent, and that's what he's here fighting for right now. because all he cared about before was getting back home. Now, the only thing is, just as a fan, I know Daryl has people back home that he was fighting for and caring for before. So it's like, is this entirely new to Daryl's arc? I don't know, but at least back then it was like not his family, right? He was helping Judith, he was Uncle Daryl. He's never like a father figure per se. So now he kind of does have that. So I guess there is the question of how new is this to the story really? Although we do have kind of Daryl's first romance storyline other than Leia, who we don't talk about. Yeah, I really like this scene. The only nitpick I have is, prisoners wouldn't be housed next to each other, so really they shouldn't be able to have this conversation. Somebody who is keeping them prisoner would want them separated. You want them to feel isolated. You don't want them to be a united front, so you wouldn't have them right next to each other. But that's just one of those things you have to accept. It's like in every movie, so it's fine. And here we got the nest scene. Everything's converging, and that's cut the same time with Losang trying to get through to Isabel. And he looks at Daryl as a lost cause. Daryl's never going to be on his side, and he wants to take Isabel away to try to convince her. And here we have the big plan on Janae's part to use the fast zombies as a bioweapon to attack the nest. Now, I question this plan very much so. And it's not logical when you really break it down, because the zombies are not tameable, and they're animals essentially. You can't tell them what to do. And she's like, we've been training these people. Why do you need to train them if they're just going to be mindless zombies? What do you have to train them for? And the strength is like artificially implemented with the serum. So it's not even like they need to bulk up so you can make them the fast zombies again. It's just... and there's the fact that they can't be controlled. There's the fact that logically, like, all of these people are going to get mowed down, and then they have to go in one at a time and inject them all with serum. And logically, I know that there's enough of the people in front of the guns here that they are going to definitely start turning while they're injecting other people with the serum. So it's like in the opening scene, we had a zombie who turned immediately and went after the scientists. And yes, the scientists did say, okay, we have to turn the dosage down. So maybe they're tweaking it and whatnot. But it doesn't feel like this is ready for the big time. Because last season, which time-wise wasn't that long ago in the story, we have the zombies' head explode when it didn't work out. So this experiment doesn't feel ready for the big time. And also there's the fact that I'm not convinced that these fast zombies would be better than just giving these people guns and having them fight, because their intelligence and ingenuity of the human brain is actually better than a mindless zombie at the end of the day, because the fact that there are still people alive in the apocalypse this far into it is indicative of that. So I don't know that I really buy this whole thing, but I do like the concept. She's like, we crushed the Union's tyranny of false hope. She's talking about crushing the faith, the story, the narratives. And I like this idea that there has to be a narrative to bring people together, like a story of how to get through the next day. And I believe in that personally. I think you need to have a vision for the future. You have to have a reason to get up in the morning. You need to have faith. These are things that I think are just like vitamins. They're essential to the human spirit. So I like playing with that a little bit. And she has her own version, believe it or not, because here she's like, right now you're making the most noble sacrifice and you'll be remembered for eternity. And that's a faith-based thing. The idea that, that of course they can just all die tomorrow, right? Like this whole Madame Janae movement could get taken out. So, it's another, and she's talking about liberty, even though she's housing people in a way that they can't leave, that they're forced to do the things that they say. So, again, it's just like a bunch of false promises. So I do like the projection, the mirror image going on with the two sides. But just the fast zombie plan, I do like the twist with Carol being turned as well. But I do question overall how this final scene goes. And I don't know. I just don't know. What do you guys think? Do you guys buy into it? It is cool that we're getting fast zombies, but I'm just like, it doesn't feel like a good plan to me. So, and they don't even need zombies to take over this nest, I don't think. All they need to do is cut it off. I mean, it would be a long-term play. It's not going to turn tomorrow, but they could just lay siege to the island, not let anybody leave, and eventually they'll probably run out of resources. They could even just get a legit trebuchet and start lobbing bombs over the walls. There are things that they can do that don't involve killing all your soldiers, because at the end of the day, it's a waste of resources. If you take the morality out of it and just look at it practically, you have these loyal soldiers who are willing to die for your cause, and you're just throwing them away, essentially. So I don't know, guys. I'm not really buying it. I have a problem with this final scene. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section. And with that, it's been your boy Shuggy, and we'll see you guys in the next video. Definitely sub if you want to see more reviews, and I hope to see you guys in the next one. Thanks for watching, everybody. Peace out.